So my country of choice was Germany. Two major reasons for this. Number one, German heritage on both my husband and I's side of the family. Number two, a lot of the like Disney princesses and other like fairy tale whatnots that are romanticized and published today in their own twists are some sort of German fairy tale, and actually a lot of them are Brothers Grimm. And I have just about the coolest family heirloom possible. It is a Brothers Grimm fairy tale. It was published or copyright in 1897. I will show you that here. Hopefully you can read that. Copyright 1897, Donahue, Henneberry and Company. Printed in Chicago. This book has several books in it. Rapunzel is the book I will be reading. I just want to show this because it's really cool. We can't read some of it, but I know the names, so I can read the names. I know it pretty well says presented to, and then it's got some extra wording above the other names, and we're not sure if that is names or what, but the names that we can read are Frank Murphy, age 8 years old, Arthur Murphy, age 4 years, Wilbur Murphy, age 10, and Annie Murphy, age 13. So Arthur Murphy is my great-grandfather. So there's Arthur, then Ron, then KB, then me. And we have like searched the family and tried like putting these names to faces. And we know who Frank, Arthur, and Wilbur are, but we do not know who Annie is. But she was the last one to have the book, except it ended up with Arthur's kid. So we're not sure how that happened. But we're kind of excited. I'm excited about it. I enjoy having this book. It is falling apart. The spine is hardly attached. You have to be very, very nice to it. But with all of the adaptations of Rapunzel, like I love Rapunzel. I love the story of Rapunzel. And I love that it's a spiteful, vengeful, like it's Disney adopts and adapts so many Brothers Grimm and other really horrid stories, and they romanticize them and they sell them to children. And I think that the originals, or knowing where the originals came from, is really cool. But I greatly appreciate Rapunzel, especially because it's fueled, like, the whole story is just spite. And that's just interesting to me. I've read other adaptations of Rapunzel for my portfolio before, and so I'm excited to read this one. Now, the book opens fairly well at the very beginning, but Rapunzel is towards the end in this book. And it's a little harder to open the pages completely. Like, I can open it enough to read, but I don't know that I can open it enough to show you what I'm reading while I'm reading. So I will show you what I can while I can. But I'm not going to try to break the book to show you and read it to you at the same time. So, you of all people will understand that. Anyway, without further ado, here is the original Rapunzel. There once lived a man and his wife who had long wished for a child, but in vain. Now there was at the back of their house a little window which overlooked a beautiful garden full of the finest vegetables and flowers, but there was a high wall all around it, no one ventured into it, for it belonged to a witch of great might, and of whom the world was afraid. One day the wife was standing at the window and looking into the garden. She saw a bed filled with the finest rampion, and it looked so fresh and green that she began to wish for some, and at length she longed for it greatly. This went on for days. As she knew she could not get the rampion, she pined away and grew pale and miserable. Then the man was uneasy and asked, "Oh, what is the matter, dear wife?" "Oh," she answered, "I shall die unless I can have some of that rampion to eat that grows in the garden at the back of our house." The man, who loved her very much, thought to himself, "Rather than lose my wife, I will get some rampion, cost it what it will." So in the twilight he climbed over the wall into the witch's garden, plucked hastily a handful of rampion, and brought it to his wife. She made a salad of it at once, and ate of it to her heart's content, but she liked it so much, and it tasted so good, that the next day she longed for it thrice as much as she had done before. If she was to have any rest, the man must climb over the wall once more. So he went into the twilight again. As he was climbing back, he saw all at once the witch standing before him, and was terribly frightened, as she cried with angry eyes, "How dare you climb over into my garden like a thief, and steal my rampion? It shall be the worse for you." "Oh," he answered, "be merciful rather than just. I have only done it through necessity, for my wife saw your rampion out of the window, and became possessed with such great longing that she would have died if she could not have some of it to eat." Then the witch said, If it is all as you say, you may have as much rampion as you like, on one condition. The child that will come into this world must be given to me. It shall go well with the child, and I will care for it like a mother." In his distress of mind, the man promised everything, and when the time came, when the child was born, the witch appeared, and giving the child the name of Rapunzel, which is the same as rampion, she took it away with her. Rapunzel was the most beautiful child in the world. When she was 12 years old, the witch shut her up in a tower in the midst of wood, and it had neither steps nor a door, only a small window above. When the witch wished to be let in, she would stand below and would cry, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel had long, beautiful hair that shone like gold. When she heard the voice of the witch, she would undo the fastenings of the upper window, unbind the plaits of her hair, and let it down 20 ells below, and the witch would climb up by it. After they had lived thus a few years, it happened that as the king's son was riding through the wood, he came to the tower, and as he drew near, he heard a voice singing so sweetly that he stood still and listened. It was Rapunzel, in her loneliness, trying to pass away the time in sweet songs. The king's son wished to go into her, and sought to find a door into the tower, but there was none, so he rode home. But the song had entered into his heart, and every day he went into the wood and listened to it. Once he was standing there under a tree, he saw the witch come up and listened while she called out, "Oh, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Then he saw how Rapunzel let down her long tresses, and how the witch climbed up by them and went in to her. He said to himself, "Since that is the ladder, I will climb it and seek my fortune." The next day, as soon as it began to grow dusk, he went to the tower and cried, "Oh, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel was greatly terrified when she saw that a man had come in to her, for she had never seen one before. But the king's son began speaking so kindly to her, and told her how her singing had entered his heart, so that he could have no peace until he had seen her himself. Then Rapunzel forgot her terror, and when he asked her to take him for her husband, and she saw that he was young and beautiful, she thought to herself, "I certainly like him much better than old Mother Gothel." She put her hand onto his hand, saying, I would willingly go with thee, but I do not know how I shall get out. When thou comest, bring each time a silken rope, and I will make a ladder, and when it is quite ready, I will get down by it out of the tower, and thou shalt take me away on thy horse." They agreed that he should come to her every evening as the old woman came in the daytime. So the witch knew nothing of all of this, until Rapunzel said to her unwittingly, "Mother Gothel, how is it that you climb up here so slowly, and the king's son is with me in a moment?" "Oh, you wicked child," cried the witch, "what is this I hear? I thought I had hidden thee away from all the world, and thou hast betrayed me." In her anger, she seized Rapunzel by her beautiful hair, struck her several times with her left hand, then grasping a pair of shears in her right, snip, snap, the beautiful locks lay on the ground. And she was so hard-hearted that she took Rapunzel and put her in a desert place, where she lived in great woe and misery. The same day on which she took Rapunzel away, she went back to the tower in the evening, and made fast the several locks of hair to the window. To the window hasp. I'm sorry, that word was in the binding and it was hard to see. And made fast the several locks of hair to the window hasp, and the king's son came and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Then she let the hair down, and the king's son climbed up. But instead of his dearest Rapunzel, he found the witch looking at him with wicked, glittering eyes. "Aha!" she cried, mocking him. "You came for your darling, but the sweet bird sits no longer in the nest and sings no more. The cat has got her, and will scratch out your eyes as well. Rapunzel is lost to you. You will see her no more." The king's son was beside himself with grief. In his agony he sprang from the tower. He escaped with his life, but the thorns on which he fell put out his eyes. Then he wandered blind through the wood, eating nothing but roots and berries, doing nothing but lament and weep for the loss of his dearest wife. So he wandered several years in misery, until at last he came to the desert place where Rapunzel lived with her twin children that she had borne, a boy and a girl. At first he heard a voice that he thought he knew, and when he reached the place from which it seemed to come, Rapunzel knew him, and fell on his neck and wept. When her tears touched his eyes, they became clear again, and he could see with them as well as ever. Then he took her to his kingdom, where he was received with great joy, and there they lived long and happily. There are not a whole lot of crazy exotic details, except for in these photos, which aren't, we think of like children's books having to cover the whole page, and the whole page has to be interesting, and these are very simple. Like this is the middle of the story, and this page doesn't even have anything on it. Nothing. And it's not like there's a page missing, because there isn't. But that page left intentionally blank. So the hero cycle is, it's a little odd for this story, but the call to adventure is kind of, I guess I shouldn't say that, the ordinary world, like, you know, introducing it as like, oh yeah, we could live there, that's like, we could imagine that. Anyway, then the call to adventure, I'm not sure what that green light is, I'm sorry. The call to adventure in this seems really weird, but it is Rapunzel's mom wanting the Rampion, or the Rapunzel. Her I should say biological mother. Refusal of the call would be the, like, oh no, we shouldn't do that, the witch lives there. And then jumping, like, into the garden anyway and getting it. Then going back and the witch showing up. Usually it would be, the next step would be, like, meeting a mentor. And it's the witch who is not a mentor in the way that we would assume would be, like, this great grand, like, Gandalf that's going to show up and help us. But she's, like, a selfish, going to do it for herself kind of person and kind of character. And so she kind of is the devil's advocate of the supernatural aid that's going to show up through our hero's journey. And with that, when she appears, we cross the threshold from the ordinary world to, like, just this story's world. And that is, like, the witch and the taking of the child. Because it is a matter of, we don't have witches in our ordinary world. We have some crazy people that think they are, but they're not. And with that, there is only so much, there's only so many characters in this, and so everything is kind of split amongst all 4 of them, 5 of them. Our approach would be from our king's son showing up. The story is weird, being that only Rapunzel and Gothel have names, and only Rapunzel uses Gothel's name. Like, nobody else has a name or rates a name, I guess, is the way to look at it. Anyway, the approach of the king's son, the, like, major ordeal or major conflict is him coming through the window and Rapunzel being terrified, like, oh my goodness, this is new, this is scary. And it was brief in this version, but because he spoke and she's like, wow, another human, and she, like, breaks from her shell of, I don't have to be locked up here, I don't have to do this, I don't have to live like this. And so it is the death of her innocence to a point, more so the death of her submissive servitude, and the rebirth into the spiteful, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make a ladder of rope, and I'm going to be free. And then the seizing of the sword, so to speak, would be Gothel cutting Rapunzel's hair when she finds out all of what is going on. And Gothel takes the eyes from the prince, and they are all, like, wandering on the road back to kind of the beginning of the circle. Rapunzel in the desert, the prince is blind, the resurrection, Rapunzel singing, and he hears her, and he finds her, and the return, and this, again, the supernatural element comes into it of, like, the healing tears of this woman, because, and it all ties back into the Rapunzel plant being so special, but it's kind of a crazy concept, and then you just ease right back on in from that supernatural, like, return to normal, that just return, just like justice, not like, oh, just happened. Anyway, and then you kind of just ease back on in into your ordinary world. They go back to the king's son, or the prince's home kingdom, and they live long and happily with their 2 children, and you are left to assume that they led ordinary lives and they did what they were going to do and they were content. And it's a weird turn of events that goes from like what you know to, oh holy crap, this isn't actually possible in our life, to, oh man, this is kind of like comeuppance for what happened back there that didn't actually happen in our life. And you go back, you go from the known to the, oh no, supernatural something's pushing us into the unknown, to, hey, we figured out the unknown and this is how we're combating it, which is almost always is mimics, even if it's not. Usually it's an ironic twist on the crossing of the threshold. Crossing into the unknown, crossing out of is usually the ironic reverse of. And then just returning to the ordinary known world as if that is the best thing ever. It's kind of an odd concept.